So 2023 was supposed to represent season 1 of the Houston Texans rebuild. But the Texans decided to press the fast forward button on the remote and speed run through their first year of their rebuild, and also upload that to speedrun.com and put it into the category of fastest rebuild in NFL history. Because that's exactly what it felt like, because CJ Stroud looked like a veteran quarterback as each and every game progressed. As the season wore along, DeMeco Ryans was a really good head coach, and as the season progressed later on in the year, a lot of players stepped up in support of CJ Stroud, especially when it came to the field of play. As the Texans went 10-7, they won the AFC South Division title, and they actually won a playoff game against the Cleveland Browns. And, it was a big surprise at the time, and they actually made it as far as the divisional game. Sure, they lost to the top-seeded Baltimore Ravens, but the future was bright for them. They were well ahead of schedule. They certainly have arrived, more than arrived, much earlier than expected. So there was nowhere else to go but up for these Texans. So how are they going to improve from this past year's surprising results? How much more higher can they go? Well, let's look at what they did to try to improve this past offseason. So they wanted to re-sign some of their key guys, like tight end Dalton Schultz, their kicker Kaimi Fairbairn, to long-term deals, and they went on the trade market. They traded for guys like running back Joe Mixon from the Bengals, the receiver Ben Skowronek from the Rams, but they also traded away defensive tackle Malik Collins to the 49ers. But perhaps the biggest move that they made this past offseason was for a receiver by the name of Stephon Diggs from the Buffalo Bills. So they gave away a second-round pick for him, but the key was getting another weapon for second-year quarterback CJ Stroud in a receiver room that's pretty much already a little, I'd say, stacked by now, because they took a big step forward last year. But getting a veteran receiver in Diggs makes that even stronger, with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and now you have Stephon Diggs. That's a stacked receiver room right there. It's even more deadly. So this Texans team, they can probably reach that ultimate goal that should be for 2024, and that is reaching their first ever AFC Championship game. So it's still very early to say whether they'll do that or not, but that should be their goal for this year. So how do they achieve that goal? Well, let's look at some of their other offseason moves, starting with free agency. Now, when it comes to losing guys, honestly, they were easily replaceable. Like Devin Singletary, like I mentioned, he was already replaced by Joe Mixon. Edge rusher Jonathan Greenard and linebacker Blake Cashman, they moved on to the Vikings, but they ended up being replaced later on. And then defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins, he went to the Bengals, but he also got replaced later on. So in essence, these guys got replaced by likely better additions, like linebacker Azeez al-Shaair from the Titans, very familiar with DeMeco Ryans already from their days with the 49ers. So if the scheme's the same for al-Shaair, no problem fitting in. And then they also got edge rushers Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry from the Vikings and the Titans respectively. Better upgrade for that Houston Texans pass rush that kind of struggled at various points last year, especially when it got marred by injury. So that should be big help for Will Anderson in the front four. And then they also got defensive tackle Tim Settle from the Buffalo Bills. Again, another addition to that pass rush that kind of struggled at different points last year. So looking at the draft, they mostly focused on the defense, and that started with corner Kamari Lassiter from Georgia, and then safety Kalen Bullock from USC. But they also focused on the offensive line too. Blake Fisher from Notre Dame. So some of those key moves from the draft. And when you look at it for the Houston Texans this past offseason, it was really good for them. This is a really good offseason for them, because when you look at those moves defensively, like Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry, and that front four now, they should be a much more opposing force. They should be able to better get at the quarterback, given that they stay healthy though. And then offensively, the protection that was a problem for CJ Stroud last year. It should be a lot better, especially considering that left tackle Laremy Tunsil was like the only guy that was very consistent last year. So he gets some much needed help with new addition, the rookie Blake Fisher, taking over Titus Howard's spot at right tackle. Titus Howard's going to move inside the line, whether it's at guard or at center. He'll take one of those guard spots, so it'll be interesting how this protection will hold up, but at least on paper, it should be better. So speaking of CJ Stroud, he should be able to take an even bigger step in year 2. Like he already took a surprise leap in his rookie year, but I feel like he's gonna take an even bigger one with Stephon Diggs at one of the receiver spots. I mean, like I said, you already have Nico Collins, you already have Tank Dell, who unfortunately was lost very late in the season with a serious injury, but you add in all those 3 elements, this passing attack is going to be very dangerous. And don't forget Dalton Schultz in it as well. So that's like a 4-headed dragon in the passing game. So Stephon Diggs, especially, who regressed in the back half of last year in Buffalo with I guess it had some of it had to do with the coordinator change from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady, and maybe there was some dysfunction with him and Josh Allen. I don't know what it was with that regression, but either way, he's also seeking to bounce back now with this new change in scenery. And then the rushing attack should also be a little bit better with the addition of Joe Mixon, and don't forget, Dameon Pierce also has something to prove as well in the reserve role as well. So looking at some of the Texans' key games this season, you start on the road taking on the Indianapolis Colts, so a very early division game right out of the gate, taking on Anthony Richardson, so something has to give, but for the Texans, if you're looking at them, they certainly not going to give that one away if you're looking at it from their point of view. Then you come home to take on the upstart Chicago Bears with Caleb Williams, so that should be an interesting matchup like very early on in the season. And then weeks 4 to 5 should be an interesting test. You host the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Buffalo Bills back-to-back weeks. At least you're on home turf. And then much later down the season, where things could get really interesting, depending on where the Texans are, a date with the Kansas City Chiefs right before Christmas, the week before in Arrowhead. So who knows where both teams will be at by that point, whether it be for a top spot in the conference, seeding, who knows, maybe both teams are in contention for a division title, who knows. But either way, should be an interesting late season matchup for both of those teams. So obviously the biggest thing going for the Texans, my biggest question for them is, well, my expectation. Like I'm not sure what to expect for this second year of CJ Stroud and DeMeco Ryans, because they really surprised me last year with how much CJ Stroud developed like that fast in a hurry, and then how well coached they were. So you just have to wonder and hope that they're going to be even better this year, if not as good as the previous year. So, like I said, nowhere else to go but up. Hopefully they don't go down, because the Texans are really good. So for the Texans, they were the most unexpected team that arrived a year early into their rebuild. Like I'm not kidding you. This is like, they're legit, because they improved their team this past offseason, like in what was supposed to be the second year of their rebuild, but all of a sudden they're a playoff contender now. And that, with that being said, it's not that crazy to believe or to say that the Texans have a high chance to win the AFC South again, but also they have a pretty good shot if things go right, as long as they play to their expectations, as long as they stay healthy, they can make it to their first ever AFC Championship game in January. I know it's very far away, but this team is so talented. They play very well. They're very well coached. But again, it's all going to come down to playing to expectations and playing consistently. But yeah, if they go their way, they can go the distance and make it to their first title game in January.